G'day, and welcome to ComicsMATE, your mates in comics from the land down under. I'm Dean James, and today we're going to be going over everything in episode 1 of the newly released X-Men 97. We spoke about all the rumours and leaks before the show was released, and many people, myself included, were not impressed by what we had heard or seen. You can check out my video on all of that up in the corner now. But I'm very happy to say that this new show is actually really good. Given it is only the first 2 episodes, there's plenty of time left for Disney to ruin it, but as of episode 2, it's not woke at all. It feels very much like the classic cartoon and is even better in some ways. So as long as they keep this up and don't pull a weird bait and switch a few more episodes in, I think it's safe to say we might actually have a hit on our hands. You know, something that fans of the X-Men desperately need, considering the state of the comics for what seems like forever at this point. Fair warning, I will be spoiling the first 2 episodes because there's a lot in here I want to talk about. So if you haven't already, please like and subscribe and I'll jump right into this. The first episode opens with the classic intro song that we all know and love, but it's a synth remix? Reanimated by the new team working on the series, with all the classic scenes remade for this new series. In my opinion, it doesn't go quite as hard as the old version, but it's still pretty good, I can't deny that. When the episode actually starts, we see New York and hear a news broadcaster reporting that Charles Xavier was killed as they take a look back on his life, which has led to mankind feeling more sympathy towards mutants than ever before, which leads to a contradictory scene showing that Roberto da Costa, aka Sunspot, has been taken hostage by human supremacists, the self-proclaimed Friends of Humanity, explaining that they have a mysterious rich buyer who is willing to pay big money for every mutant they capture. But before anything can happen to Roberto, they're interrupted by the X-Men, specifically Storm and Bishop, who break through the roof in an attempt to save the kidnapped teenager. The bad guys immediately open fire on them when Cyclops breaks through the wall to back them up. Cyclops is surprisingly badass through this entire show so far, using his powers in ways that are just plain awesome. Storm in particular feels exactly like the weather goddess powerhouse she has always been. But I will not forgive that they cut off Bishop's mullet. I hate this new haircut. After a short fight scene, the FOH have gained the upper hand, but they make the fatal mistake of removing Cyclops' lens, leading him to essentially blowing the entire building apart. It then cuts to the next morning where we meet Gambit, Rogue, Morph, and Jean. Jean being heavily pregnant. Other than that, all of them are essentially unchanged, despite the terrible things we all heard from the interviews and other promotional stuff coming out of Marvel before release. I honestly think they might have even changed Rogue's design at the last minute. Her eyebrows have been thinned down quite a bit, and her hair is a lot bigger than it seemed in the trailer. We then meet Beast and Jubilee, who were watching over Sunspot while he rested. After some classic big brain Beast lines, Jubilee shows Roberto the danger room, because he has been asking what else there is to do around the mansion, other than listening to Beast's Mozart. It's here we get our first look at Magneto, and his new voice actor, who actually does a really great job, speaking with all the menace and gravitas you expect from Eric Magnus Lencher. We also meet Wolverine, who is always great to see. Speaking of Wolverine, I'm glad they brought back all the original voice actors, those that are still alive at least, but I gotta admit there is a few moments where Wolverine in particular sounds old. Not bad all the time, but I could definitely hear it in his voice. He surprises Roberto near the end of the scene, giving him a good scare. Cut to Scott and Jean talking to Dr. Cooper of the United Nations, questioning her about the Sentinel weapons that the FOH had during the opening scene. She doesn't have any real answers for them, but the scene continues with Scott and Jean having a little heart-to-heart about possibly leaving the X-Men now that they're going to be parents. This is actually one of the better scenes we've ever had between Scott and Jean. Showing how they actually interact when they're alone is not something we've ever had a lot of in the old animated series, and it makes them seem more real, showing how much they care about each other before they're interrupted by a basketball smashing through the window. Outside, the rest of the team were playing basketball before Jubilee interrupted them in anger because Logan scared Roberto into leaving with his antics earlier. Jean convinces Logan to go and find him and bring him back, so he leaves, and Scott explains that if they want to find Bolivar Trask, the man responsible for the Sentinels, who we learn has been missing since they were destroyed, they need to speak to the man who killed Charles Xavier, the former NSA agent Henry Gyrick. It cuts to half the team in a nightclub in search of Roberto. Jubilee finds him and convinces him to return with them in exchange for a dance. Meanwhile, Morph teases Logan about Jean having a baby with Scott, when Logan tells Morph he believes they're going to leave the team. We then see the other half of the team talking to Gyrick, who has a sinister interaction with them before Jean invades his mind, giving her a nightmarish vision that also reveals the location of Trask and the backup Master Mold, who is creating the new Sentinels, the Sahara Desert. Cut to the X-Wing flying towards their new destination. It isn't long before a Sentinel rips off the roof of the cockpit, ripping Cyclops out of the plane and causing everyone else to be dragged out by the wind. This is an example of what I meant when I said that they made Cyclops an absolute badass. While the others are all caught by the team members that can fly, Scott instead uses his eye blast to slow his descent before landing on the ground in a classic superhero landing. This all culminates in a pretty great fight scene between the X-Men and the Sentinels, where they dispatch a good dozen of them before finding themselves outnumbered. That's when Storm comes in with her incredible powers. The Sentinels cry Omega level threat detected before Storm creates a massive thunder-powered sandstorm, destroying the remaining Sentinels where they stood. Master Mold then stands and is quickly destroyed by the Wolverine-Gambit combo we all saw in the trailers. And for everyone wondering, wouldn't that blow Wolverine's hands to pieces? I myself was asking that when the new move was first shown off, and the answer is most likely yes. They cleverly cut away from the scene after that so as not to show Wolverine's mangled fingers, but because it was a fairly big explosion that decapitated Master Mold, it most likely destroyed Logan's hands in the process. The UN arrests Trask at the scene later that night, and we go back to the mansion where Jubilee and Sunspot talk about their place in the world, where Roberto explains he doesn't want to be a mutant and that he is still hiding it from the world, including his family, so he can't join the team. He leaves after flirting with Jubilee, seemingly hinting at a soon-to-come relationship between them moving forward. The episode ends with the alarms going off saying an intruder has breached the Professor's old office. It's Magneto, who is there to take over as leader of the X-Men because that's what Charles Xavier had written in his will. This first episode was a pretty strong start, teasing a lot of what's to come, and had a lot of great references and Easter eggs for the fans of the original comics, including the photo of the original team in Xavier's office, which featured Iceman and Angel in their comic-accurate costumes, Jubilee mentioning it would be weird if Roberto's powers were to shoot gold balls out of his body, an obvious reference to the character Gold Balls from the comics, who is just ridiculous, and the entire basketball game, though it didn't happen on screen, was in the background for a lot of the scenes and looked exactly like the comics. They were even dressed the same. The animation, though choppy in some parts, looked really good in others. It seems they allocated the budget to the action scenes, which was probably a smart move, but I really hope they get an increase in the second season, because Studio Mir is capable of doing a lot better than what they did in this first episode. Either way, I, as a lifelong fan of the X-Men, was very happy with it and went straight into the second episode. As I said at the beginning of this video, there's still plenty of time for Disney Marvel to ruin this by injecting it with their modern day nonsense agenda that nobody wants. And you can be sure I'll be making a video about that if or when they do. But I actually really enjoyed this first episode, and it honestly seems like they really want to respect the source material of the original X-Men comics. The animation itself definitely has some places it could improve, but all of the action scenes looked mostly good, and the characters were all pretty spot on. I particularly like what they're doing with Cyclops and Storm, which you will see more of in my breakdown of episode 2 coming out tomorrow. So if you enjoyed this, feel free to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of my future videos. Whether this show turns out to be good or bad, I'm going to be covering the entire series. I have a lot of thoughts on this show and have been following the X-Men since I was a little kid, so I'm a bit of an expert when it comes to the X-Men lore. But what do you think? Did you watch the premiere of X-Men 97? Do you disagree with my thoughts? Or are you on board the X-Men hype train? Either way, that's all I have for you today. My name's Dean James, your mate in comics from the land down under. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys again next time.